afternoon, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Sorry, adjust that a little bit more. Thank you for joining us today, our February RAND meeting. I am Becky O'Brien, the outgoing chair for the Communications Subcommittee. This will be my last meeting as chair. I would like to thank all of the RAC Communications Subcommittee members who really are the backbone behind this. If you'd stand up, we got them sprinkled around a little bit. Thank you. And in particular, I want to welcome Kathy Leibowitz. She will be the new incoming chair for the subcommittee. So you'll start seeing her up here. I also wanted to recognize and welcome any newcomers. If this is your first meeting, and if you're comfortable, if you'd stand up and let us welcome you. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. We hope you could keep coming. And we have our remote viewers watching from their computer somewhere in the universe. And we are live broadcasting this, and we also will have a recording of this after the end of this meeting. We'll put it up probably next week. It'll be up to watch, so if there's something you wanted to take a look at afterwards. Next, I would like to introduce, a couple of reminders real quick. Don't forget to put on your name tag so people know who you are. And if you'd sign in and let us know who's here, we really appreciate that information. And now I will turn it over and introduce our MC for today, Kathy C. Ostrowski. She is the department administrator in the biomedical engineering department.
Thank you, Becky. I'm so thrilled to be back after a couple of years to serve as the MC for this particular meeting. And we have a lot of cool things on the agenda for you. And so what I wanted to say first, though, before we get into the agenda, I wanted to just say that, it's winter. It gets dark early. People get weary. A lot of you are doing lots of work, right? A lot of work. And maybe you're feeling a little down and out. And so, we have a lot of guests here. We're going to be hearing from you more, sponsored programs, ORSP. But before we hear from them, I and others thought it might be a good idea if we just took a little time to maybe uplift each other, have some words of encouragement, maybe make people feel better about all the hard work that you all do. So I brought with me my little U of M lunch bag of positive affirmations. Would it be okay with you if I just read one to encourage us all? All right, I'm pulling one out. Got to put on the glasses. Well, this one looks like it's actually for a specific person. And his name is James Green from the Kellogg Eye Center. Is he here today? Is James here today? Where's James? Well, maybe he's on the live stream. James, I hope you're listening. Because your boss, Dr. Grant Comer, has some words that he wants to share with you. James, you constantly amaze me with the depth and breadth of your clinical research knowledge. Your willingness to patiently share your expertise in finance, study operations, compliance, and scientific principles, yet maintain the humility to actively increase your knowledge makes you an ideal leader. You have that unquantifiable ability to just get it when it comes to every aspect of clinical research. And I can't thank you enough for your contributions to the patients and study teams supported by the Kellogg Clinical Research Center. So if James is here and he's just being quiet and will not stand, James, we owe you a round of applause. This is our encouragement for you. And with that, I get to turn it over to Craig Reynolds of ORSP, who's going to be giving us an update.
Good afternoon, everyone. You guys. I've finally learned not to bring a drink up here, so that's good news. So I have to catch a flight to DC to talk to some agency folks about other support and current and pending support. So I won't be able to stay through the whole presentation, and I'm sad to say that I'm going to miss everything about the general data protection regulations, but I'm sure it's going to be a great talk. So I will just dive right into zero waste event. This is a zero waste event. This is not my slide. We will not be wasting any time. So last time we were here, I introduced you to some of the new folks in the office, but I didn't have pictures. So now I have pictures, and I have one new person. Hillary Bond is our latest project representative on the private sponsors team. So say hello, Hillary. She has been here only 2 weeks. So brief has been her tenure that we didn't have time to take a picture of her. This is from LinkedIn, where she got jauntily caught by the photographer. It's a great shot. And there you see the smiling faces of Ariel and Manny, who I think are here, or at least a couple. Ariel's here, yep. I didn't see Manny. And the smiling faces of Christy and Patrick and Becca, and some of them are here. I know Becca's here, and I'm not sure about others, but we are glad to have them all here on the team. In addition, I have a number of other HR updates. I don't have a picture of Sue Murphy, but if you know Sue, this is the way she likes it. But Sue Murphy is going to be retiring. This is her last week, and so she is a support staff member in ORSP and been there for many years, and we are going to miss her quite a bit. So actually, this is a more apt picture for Sue. She is headed off to retirement. I can also share with you that Terry Maxwell is going to retire. I know. There she is. Terry, stand up. Stay all the way up. So I can't say that we'll ever be able to replace Terry, but there is a posting out on the jobs website for a new person who could possibly dare to replace Terry. So if you're interested in the job or you know someone, encourage them to apply. So we're going to miss you, Terry. It's not immediate. It's in May, right? It's in May, so there's plenty of time. Less time is for our assistant director, Yvonne Sturt, who is also leaving to take an opportunity outside the hallowed halls of the University of Michigan. And so I have my own daily affirmation that I'm gonna share, and Terry and Yvonne, you're gonna have to split this. This is from the top of a YQ protein lid, the yogurt that I had for lunch, and it says, "It's a good day to be amazing." So I'm gonna let you guys have that. That's the extent of my planning for all of these big events. So on to more important, well, not more important, but important matters that I want to get into. First of all, very briefly, I want to remind you all about the internal deadline policy, if you hadn't heard about it. Just a reminder that it went into effect January 6th. So far, it seems to have been working well. And as a reminder, depending on when the finalized proposal and PAF arrive in ORSP, will determine what level of service that proposal and the PAF review gets. And a couple of pro tips based on the first close to 2 months of having the deadline policy in effect. Pay close attention to question 1.2 on the path, where we ask, why are you sending us this path? And there are three options. One is to process the submission of a proposal. One of them is to request the review or negotiation of agreement, or both. The reason this is important is because the whole deadline policy is driven around whether or not there is a date in the submission deadline field. And if you answer just to request the review and negotiation of an agreement, we don't even ask for the deadline. So getting it wrong the first time causes a lot of rework for you and for a lot of folks. So pay particular close attention to question 1.2. And the other pro tip for today is that if the project team is doing the submission to the sponsor rather than ORSP, make sure that the submission is logged in ERPM prior to the sponsor's submission deadline. That will make sure that the PAF doesn't enter into a state like deadline missed. So keep on top of those, words to the wise. On the agency front, things are crazy. The new PAP guide, the Proposals and Awards Policies and Procedures Guide, was recently released effective June of this year. There was a webinar that was put on last week or 2 weeks ago now that I have not gotten a chance to get through myself, but I understand is very informative. I would encourage you to look at it. I mean, the two big takeaways which we've been trying to impress upon everyone is that there is a requirement to use Science CV for the generation of the biosketch and the current and pending support. Although I heard there's going to be an option, but we don't know what exactly that option is just yet. But please do visit the NSF webpage, look at view the webinar, and make sure that if your faculty are applying to NSF, that you get a head start on getting the biosketch up into Science CV and the current and pending support. Related to current and pending support, the PAP guide adopts a new definition of current and pending support. For those of you that have been keeping tabs on the NIH, the NSF definition is very similar, but not exactly the same. So current and pending support for NSF is all resources made available to an individual in support of or related to their research efforts, whether or not they have a monetary value. So that means in kind. All sorts of stuff that we typically haven't thought of constituting current and pending support for NSF's purposes is also now current and pending support. And the current and pending support must be provided for the proposed project, ongoing projects, and any proposals currently under consideration, regardless of source or recipient. I hate reading slides, but it's important to get it exactly right. So we are challenged in the same way we are with NIH to understand exactly what it is that constitutes current and pending support when we start talking about in-kind contributions with non-monetary value, regardless of who provides it or who receives it. NSF released last week an FAQ that addresses specifically the current and pending definition. They helpfully clarified that gifts are excluded from current and pending support. But they have also said that gifts cannot have an expected effort commitment with them. So I would not be surprised if we have gifts that have expected effort commitments with attendance to them and would be considered current and pending support. So I don't know exactly what expected means. The donor usually expects something to be done with the money, and usually that involves some faculty doing something. So we're going to learn more about what the definitions mean on a deeper level around the concept of expected effort on a gift. I want to say that NSF has been trying to make it clear, but I'm not sure that this FAQ is actually clarified anything. At least it's confused me. So when it comes to the notion of in-kind contributions and whether or not it's current and pending support, NSF in the FAQ distinguishes between in-kind contributions that have an associated effort commitment and those that do not. So in the decision tree, I tried about 3 times to work through it, say it different ways. I'm just going to say it the way NSF does. If you have an in-kind contribution that has an associated effort commitment with that in-kind contribution, and it's used in the project, then you describe it in the facilities and equipment and other resources section. If you have an in-kind contribution with an associated effort commitment that is not used in the project, then it's in current and pending support. Then, to further challenge our logical thinking, in-kind contributions without an associated effort commitment, if it's used in the project, is described in the facilities and equipment and other resources section. And alternatively, if it's in-kind contribution without associated effort, then we don't report it at all. There will be a quiz. So it's helpful at least to know what NSF is thinking, but we're going to find out more about that and probably tomorrow when I'm in DC. So NIH, our good friends there, if you haven't heard, the executive level 2 salary cap has been released, and it's 197.3. There is a new grants policy statement that was released, retroactively effective going back to October 1st of last year. And in the grants policy statement revision, NIH adopted the clarified definition of other support from the July 2019 notice -OD-19-114. What? So here's the definition of other support from NIH, which is very similar to, but not exactly the same as, NSF's definition of current and pending support. So there, all resources made available to a researcher or senior key personnel in support of and or related to their research endeavors, whether they have monetary value or not, and regardless of whether they're located at University of Michigan or not. I don't know what isn't other support. When you start talking about all resources that are related to an investigator's research, whether or not they have monetary value and regardless of who receives it or where it's located, it's exceedingly difficult to draw the line between what is other support and what is now considered appropriate material for the facilities section, just for instance. But we're working on it. We have, again, meeting with NIH in a couple days, and we will ask them for clarification, especially on what does it mean to be related to but not supporting a faculty member's research. In any event, this is the definition. It does exclude training awards, prizes, gifts for past achievements, or U of M startup support. So that is not considered other support. Now, we've been trying really hard to get the word out around this new definition, this clarified definition of other support from NIH. And one of the things, if you haven't heard, is that we did 3 town halls that focused pretty extensively on other support and also foreign components, which is another term of art from NIH. That webinar is out on the web, and the accompanying slide deck is available. There's an FAQ with 43 or 44 questions on it. Those of you that went through the exercise of providing updated other support in January are familiar with a lot of this, but we've modified it to be more appropriate going for future practice. One thing I do want to mention is that when we requested updated other support in January, on the form that we shared, there was a section for collaborations, foreign international engagement and collaborations. Technically, that's not a requirement for other support. And the new template we have out on our website does not have that category. So go get the newest template if you're using a template provided by the university. Other ways in which we are getting the word out includes we're updating the post-award change request form specifically to address the foreign components and the requirement that we get prior approval for a foreign component. And we have updated the documentation we send out when it's either time to submit a final or annual RPPR or just-in-time guidance, so we're spelling out the requirements about other support there, just to get it out in everyone's, in front of the right eyes at the right time. And as I said, we created the other support reporting page. The URL is right there, where you'll find templates and examples, the FAQ, and guidance. So share the word as well as, if you can, with your colleagues and your faculty. There's also some changes that I can't say are 100% written in stone, but are pretty likely. That one of the changes that we'll be introducing as a policy change and practice change is who signs the path. It's very likely to be the case that every investigator who is named on the path will be required to sign the path, not just the PI. Partly that's because right now the PI attests on behalf of him or herself and his or her family and everyone else on the project. And that's a pretty far stretch to ask a PI to attest for everyone on the project. It's also very likely that we will require M-informed disclosures for any federally funded project. And we will be, the royal we, not really me, we'll be updating both M-inform and the PI sign activity to make it easier to navigate and know what to do. Because people want to do the right thing. It's just sometimes challenging to know what it is. Oh. So I'm almost done here. I'm about, my family say, they say that, you know, I love bad dad jokes. The only thing worse than a bad dad joke is a bad research administrator joke. So I'm going to make you glad that I'm catching a plane with this last slide. And I'm sorry for those of you that won't be able to see it, but here it is. Can anyone guess what this image is? Okay. NIH, utter support. Tip your waiters, tip your waitresses. I won't be here. That's all I've got. I'm now very pleased to introduce David Grimm from the Office of General Counsel, where he is an Associate General Counsel. He has expertise in both technology and privacy law, as well as international and immigration law. Got his AB from a place called Harvard, not heard of it, but Notre Dame is just down the road, which is where he got his JD, and he'll be here discussing, not that, the General Data Protection Regulation Act. So please welcome David.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everybody is ready to spend the next 4 hours talking about GDPR. You know, it's one of those topics where I'm given 15 minutes today. My hope is that I can get everyone just thinking about GDPR. And as Craig said, it's the General Data Protection Regulation. This is not enough time to go in depth. It's not enough time to even cover all the different things that are associated with GDPR, but at least wanted to get everyone thinking about it. And so what we're going to do here in the next 15 or so minutes is just talk a little bit about how did we get here, what is the GDPR, what's the personal data definition, and how is it different from what you might think of from a US perspective, when and why GDPR may apply, and then I'll leave a little bit of time for Q&A, and then we can go from there. So when we think about how we got to the place that we are today with data protection rules, most privacy rules, regulations around the world, there's a distinct sort of difference between the way that the EU approaches data privacy and the way that the US approaches data privacy. And so if you think about the EU political and legal history, in 1948 there was the UN Declaration of Human Rights, and that basically said that you are not subject to arbitrary interference in your privacy, family, home, or correspondence, right? So you can think about this in the political, sort of space about what was happening in the 1940s in the European, in what now is the European Union. And in the 1995, they actually declared it a fundamental right that you have privacy. That is very different from where we stand in the US. In the US, we have a very sectoral, oh, put this up? Okay, sorry.
That's gonna run off and do it.
That's all right, thank you. And so in the US, we have a very sectoral approach to privacy. And we have laws that govern specific types of privacy. So we have HIPAA and FERPA and COPA and the Common Rule and all those sorts of different things. It's a very different space, right? In the EU, you are guaranteed privacy. In the US, laws tell you when you're able to have privacy. And so when you think about that in the context of an additional, of personal data from the perspective of the EU, which is now a little bit more broad than the things that we talk about from a PII perspective in the US. So again, think about, we have a very different stage for the privacy perspective. And then we're going to talk about GDPR data, personal data. And basically what it says is that anything that can be used to identify a natural person. In the US, we really think about PII as name, address, social security number, those sorts of things. But in the EU, you add in a layer to the GDPR that goes above and beyond that. So things like IP address, right? That's something in the US, internet providers, ISPs, Google, all those companies take and they digest, analyze, process, do whatever they want with. In the GDPR, or in the EU under the GDPR, that's now a personal data set that has to be processed in a lawful manner. Cookie IDs, advertising, unique advertising identifiers of a phone, things like that, even this answers to an exam question. So when you think about this in terms of where we are with respect to the US versus the GDPR, you really need to think about the political aspects and the data aspects. And now we're going to talk about what the GDPR is, right? Because I wanted to get to a little bit of the fundamental privacy aspects of it first, and then talk about the GDPR. And I sort of put this up glibly, but it says, before I write my name on the board, I'll need to know how you're planning to use that data, right? Because about 2 years ago now, in May 25th of 2018, the world shifted, and GDPR came into play. And what it is it really talks about, harmonizing the rules around in the EU around data privacy. And when you think about that, beforehand there was the Data Protection Directive, which was just that, a directive, it wasn't guaranteed. And now you have another formalization through the GDPR of the data privacy rules in the EU, where it says, if you're in the EU, you're going to process data in a certain way. And so when we think about that, it's a slight oversimplification, but I'm trying to beat a dead horse here, so I apologize while you all sort of walk through this with me. In the US, you can collect data unless the law says you can't. And in the EU, you can't unless the law says you can. It's a completely different way of looking at it, and it's a completely different scope. And so, at the end of the day, when we talk about GDPR, why does a law, when I'm talking about the EU and the US, why does an EU law apply to the US, specifically to a Michigan constitutional corporation? And the reason for that is because we engage with businesses in the EU and we work with controllers or processors that are in the EU. And again, I'm using a lot of lingo here, and I apologize for that, but there's a lot of specificity that sort of goes along with the GDPR, and I'm trying to do as much as I can in the 15 minutes, and I'll leave plenty of time for questions and answers. But suffice it to say, a controller is someone who can essentially do whatever they want with the data. A processor is someone that has to do what a controller asks them to do with the data. And so, trying to concrete it a little bit for folks here. When you think about why the GDPR may apply to us, it's not applicable, again, sort of at a high level, outside of the EU, unless so it's not applicable outside of the EU, but it is applicable if anybody is in the EU, so it could be irrespective of citizenship. So you think about a cohort of non-EU students, so a bunch of folks from the UM, participating in a semester-long study abroad in Belgium, Italy, and the UK. UK, okay, with Brexit in the last couple of weeks, it's a little bit of a dicey example right now, but they are actually still subject to it. The Office of Development is engaged in a fundraising campaign and is collecting donor information from alumni that are residing in the EU. The GDPR could apply. Research consortium in the EU provides data to the University of Michigan. It's collected in the EU. It could apply. When doesn't it apply? It doesn't apply when you're collecting the data in the US. So that's again irrespective of citizenship. So when you think about an expat research group that's made up of EU citizens, and they're students here at the UM, and they're forming it on campus, GDPR won't apply to that. EU faculty are recruited at an academic conference held in Orlando, Florida, not applicable. I'm not going to go through every one of these, but I want to just point out the fact that if it's not confusing enough already, try living my life. It's one of those things where you need the facts. You need to understand where the data's coming from, where it's going, how it's being used, who's collecting it, who they're collecting it from, all those different things in order to understand how and when the GDPR applies. So again, in 15 minutes, I'm not trying to make anyone in this room anything other than aware that if you have an issue, you spot an issue with GDPR, please call me. And please let me know. Please let the folks that are that you're sort of working with know that there could be an issue, and we'll resolve it and we'll think through it. And so with that, I do want to take questions. Again, I know that it's a very high-level discussion, that we've talked about this sort of big amorphous thing. I didn't even get into the penalties, which are 4% of global annual turnover. So think about that with respect to the U of M. 4% of a $9 billion corporation is a pretty big fine. That's a potential. And so there are a lot of nuances, a lot of specifics here that I didn't have time to get into, but I want to make sure, again, that I have time if anyone has any specific questions. If you want, I know that there's going to be, we can work through the RAN to sort of get any questions that you all have answered. They'll funnel them to me and I can answer them. Happy to go more in depth than anything if anyone has any questions about what a controller or a processor is, but at least wanted to get a general sort of informational piece out there around what the GDPR is. Be aware of it. Don't be afraid of it. It's one of those things. Any questions? All right.
With respect to the extraterritoriality provisions of the GDPR, how do you see that being played out if there's any tax cases? And I'm wondering if you see it in future privacy legislation. Is this the direction that we're going, or are we going to be looking at more of the California piecemeal?
Sure. So the question is, with respect to the extraterritoriality piece, and that was also something that I sort of glossed over because it's one of those things that's a little bit more nuanced. But what it is essentially the EU trying to make world law. And essentially, and the question is, how do I see that playing out with respect to US or other entities around the world? And then how does that fit into what we've got with the California Consumer Protection Act, the Wisconsin Data Act, the New York Act, all those different things. So I'll take it piece by piece. The extraterritoriality, I think, It hasn't necessarily played out just yet because all of the test cases so far have had headquarters, have had some form of office space or real estate or assets in the EU when they've been fined. And so we haven't really reached the piece of what the extraterritoriality is, which is they're trying to apply this law to entities that are based outside of the EU. I suspect that until there's more precedent around what actually is a violation of the GDPR, how it can play out, what the fine sort of scales are going to be, I don't think that they're going to press the extraterritoriality piece. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be worried about it, but I think that ultimately there will be some test cases. But what I think it's going to do is actually not necessarily play out in that way, though. I think what's going to happen is that you're going to have the CCPA, the Wisconsin Act, those sorts of things sort of unify, at least in the US on a federal perspective, come up with some sort of federal law, which I know is an interesting combination or an interesting tact in sort of Congress these days to actually come up with a unified body of legislation. But sort of coming up with that and then having that mirror what the GDPR actually requires. And so I think what we're going to have is sort of this extraterritoriality piece that sort of forces the rest of the world to come along with the EU and basically sort of raise up the level of privacy for everyone. So that's sort of the answers to those questions. I think I answered all of them, if that's okay. Great. Saw one other hand over there, or no? All right. Oh, yep, sorry.
You mentioned about the fact and how much they're important to discern what the data is, where it's coming from, what we're doing with it. What are some suggestions you give to the RA to help those of us who work with the use agreements to know some of those facts?
Sure. So I think the nuts and bolts of it really are who's collecting the data, where is the data being collected, and then what are we as the University of Michigan going to do with it? So if you think about who's collecting the data, it's one of those things where, even if, and again, this is sort of a nuance, but if an entity that's based in, let's say, France is collecting the data, they're going to be subject to the GDPR sort of irrespective of where the data subjects are, because they're in the EU. And so that's key. Where the data subjects are located when the data is collected on them, that's key, because if they're in the EU, then they are subject to the GDPR, and so that would be another component. And then finally, it's what we're going to do with the data. And this gets back to the concept of what a controller or a processor is. Again, if we're going to do whatever we want with the data, if we're going to do our own independent analysis, all those sorts of things, then we want to be a controller. If we're going to do only what the other institution tells us to do, then we're going to be a processor. And so those come, with additional or sort of segregated regulatory requirements on them. But again, those would be three key data points that I want to get, at any time that we think that there's going to be data that's subject to the GDPR. Yeah.
Do you have a sense for the enforcement priorities based on the fines that come out?
Yes. So I think, and thank you. These questions are fantastic. Teeing them right up. So I think with respect to where the EU has been very cautious so far in terms of enforcing this. They've been going after, so to speak, the larger tech companies. That being said, a requirement of the regulation is that the DPA, the Data Protection Authorities, investigate every single complaint. They can't look at something and they can't say, nope, that's a no-go. They have to actually look at it, investigate it, and go forward, which is one of the reasons I think that we've seen such a slow uptick in actual enforcement, because there have been so many complaints that it's been so voluminous and they haven't necessarily staffed up for it. And so, but suffice it to say, where they are looking is the larger tech companies. Now that doesn't mean that universities are sort of, given a free pass or what have you. But I think right now, at least in these first couple of years of ramping up enforcement, when they're understaffed and they've got a lot of claims coming in, they're going to be looking at the larger companies where they can potentially get those large fines, so that they can really, sort of hit it home that the GDPR is here and it's serious. well, if there are any other questions, I know I'm running out of time here, and again, thank you for having me, and thank you for, sort of walking through with me just a little bit about the GDPR. If there are any questions, feel free to reach out to the folks who have organized this, and they can funnel those questions to me. And then the other thing is, so you have my name, I think they have my email address and everything else. Should there come up should anything come up around a specific question you have with a specific project or anything like that, please feel free to reach out to me. All right, thank you. And sorry, and I am introducing, oh, yep, all right, fantastic. Oh, all right, fantastic. Thank you so much. All right, bye-bye.
Okay, this is somebody's idea of a joke, right? I'm supposed to follow. Pardon me. Maybe I should. Okay, that's better. I'm used to that a little bit. So, as David said, he gave you a pretty good idea, of course, of the GDPR and what it means from a legal standpoint. If I start talking away from this, please let me know. I tend to move my head a lot. What I wanted to do today is give you an idea of how it might come into play for you in a more practical way as far as doing research applications, specifically with the IRB HSBS. Unfortunately, I can't speak to what IRB Med might be doing with GDPR. I think they've updated their consent template to include some language around it, but we've done a little bit more because the nature of the work that we see, we immediately saw we're going to run into some challenges here. So we'll get started with this, and a lot has been stated by David. And but if you have questions about it from more that boots on the ground, please don't hesitate to let me know. And some of the references I have at the end, David, include how to get a hold of you, as well as others who can answer your questions a little bit better than I might be able to. We have basically taken the information about GDPR and tried to establish a process within the office. And basically what the IRB is looking at, again, HSBS, are 3 key things to kick off the whole thing. Somebody says, I want to do research, and I'm thinking of going to pick something, Germany. We're going to start looking at, okay, context, or you just confirmed it, Germany, so that's the EU. Second thing that we tend to look at is going to be the issue of the identifiable natural persons. David, is it correct to say that it follows in line with our common rule? If somebody is deceased, that's not a natural person, unless you say they're a natural deceased person. So if you're thinking of doing research with deceased people, again, or deceased individuals, I should say, that follows similarly with the common rule, and that is that if somebody is dead, you're not an identifiable person anymore. You're not a human subject, so that takes care of that side of it. So this really speaks to the same way we define human subjects, being that's a person with whom you're interacting, and you're getting information about them and collecting some kind of identifiable information about them. So it's not too different. So we're on the same track, so it kind of flows. It's real good. One thing I want to point out is many of our researchers are doing coding, so that's one way to help with breaking the ability of anybody to re-identify them. However, with the GDPR, identifiability direct, indirect through, as they say, I used to know it when it first came out, pseudonymization, yes. Basically, you're coding the data. If those things exist, they consider that you have a real person there, there's personal information, and this is what we're talking about. If you are able to establish the information such that you have permanently, irreversibly destroyed any ability for anybody to relink up information, then that's considered anonymized. In this day and age, as we tell people often, even as it pertains just to research being done here, it's very hard to say that something is truly anonymous when you're interacting with subjects and collecting information. But those are things to keep in mind, okay? Sensitive data, thanks, gave me a laugh. I was telling Kathy, I almost left it out because I thought, oh, it'll date me, but it's like, it's so funny, I love it. Anyway, the third thing we look at is the nature of the data. So let's go back to what David said. He established that the people in question, if you are collecting data from people in the EU or EEA, which is Liechtenstein, Norway, and was a third one. It was on my other slide. Anyway, the point being, if you are collecting data from those people, then the GDPR is probably going to apply. And I say probably only because of that whole anonymization thing. If you're collecting data from people here in the United States who happen to be residents of those countries, easy peasy, not a problem. The issue is when you are getting data from people who are actually in the EU. The data then that we look at also has to be considered for sensitivity. A lot of you may have heard from your researchers, or you interact with us at the IRB, and we say, oh, identifiable and sensitive. And we think about sensitivity posing some potential risk to subjects if it were to be disclosed. If I can link up Diana Miller's information with her data and that gets out, that could be a real problem depending on what I'm asking about. So in this case, though, the GDPR takes it many steps beyond that. We think in terms of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. GDPR thinks about race, ethnicity. Are you asking about political opinions? Being in a union. And you see from the list, it goes on from there. So one of the things that's been challenging for our researchers is, you're kidding me. Number one, I want to collect from Germany. I'm asking about political viewpoints. I have to go through all this extra stuff. Yes, what's the extra stuff that you're going to have to do? I will tell you in a minute because I'm on a different slide. Okay. I thought I had it down like that. Okay, so just as I've described to you using that Germany example, let's look at a couple other examples. And you might be familiar with some of this because maybe some of your researchers are doing largely survey research, maybe online. Keep that in mind. First example, MTurk. If any of you are using MTurk, it's so easy. You have all these people at your disposal to give you tons and tons of data. Oh, but wait a minute. If you're making that thing, your link available anywhere and everywhere, including outside the United States, which may include the EU, now you're talking about GDPR. So we have worked with people to suggest, and this is going to sound funky, but I have to be honest. Do you have to do the research in EU? So, just saying, you might not want to if you can avoid it. If you're going through MTurk, you can get a lot of people, and maybe that'll satisfy your research goals. But if you are, you have to keep in mind the GDPR may come into play. So let me pose this to you as a question. So let's pretend somebody says, I want to use MTurk and I want to gather data. I don't care, they could be in the EU. I'm going to Canada and I'm going to the US. What are the kinds of things, given what David's already talked about, maybe that we're going to be asking him about as an IRB? Obvious things. Are they in the EU? Yes, you established that. What's the nature of the research? I mean, the nature of the questions, or the data that you're collecting. So again, we're looking at those three key things to start. Context, which is what country are you in? Is it in the EU? The second thing is there an identifiable person, for lack of, I'm going to just use easy talk. And then the third thing is, what's the nature of the data? So again, lining that all up, it's pretty clear. Another example that we have had is where the researcher's getting data via face-to-face interviews. Again, no problem. We would argue just seeing them face-to-face means that you can identify them. But again, you have to stop and think, will you be using coding? Is there a way to offset that? In this case, they're international students at the UM. Do we have a problem? Does GDPR apply? Oh, I think I heard somebody say no. Good. Correct, because it's in the US, it's right here. Again, the key point is, where are they when you collect that data? This sounds so simple now in my head, but when it first came down the pike, it caused quite a bit of challenge for folks. And then the last example I gave was about the German example, and this is a true one where the student came forward and said, I'd like to go back home and collect data, and I'm going to interview people about their political opinions. Where are you getting those people? I'm going to stop them as they come out of my local supermarket. Okay, cool. Are you collecting identifiers? No, I'm not. I just want to know what they think. Go forth and prosper. That is great because he was collecting no identifiers. He was just asking people about this information, but there was really nothing there as long as it was truly anonymous. One might argue again, that face-to-face contact, are they really truly anonymous? He didn't know these people. They were in another town from where he wasn't. So from that made it easy to work with. I'm going to share this. I might not get it all right, David. We had somebody recently with a rather unique situation where it wasn't online. They were doing research in the EU someplace, but it was face-to-face, And the determination, they weren't getting written informed consent, which we're going to talk about in a second. And so we came up with a little flex on getting that consent because it was done orally, which is a little different because one of the things that the GDPR is kind of stinky about is that you must get informed consent, and I'm missing the adjective that comes before that, but the idea is that you can't just say click here and that's your consent. They want you to have full informed written consent. Again, another layer of challenge that adds to a simple survey that you might be doing of people. But we have to think about that. What our goal is, and when we do this too, and we work with you, we're trying to find out maybe clever ways, that we can meet the obligation under the GDPR, help you out not to get into a bad position. Will you get fined? Maybe not. We're not a big tech company, but nobody needs to see Michigan's name out there because, somebody surveyed 2,000 people in Germany. I pick on Germany because it's just so convenient. And so we want to be mindful of that too, the risk to the institution, even though our primary concern is risk to the subject. So when it comes to the consent, you know already that the IRB is going to ask you, how are you consenting? And we're talking about non-exempt research right now, although I have something to say about exempt research in a minute. But for non-exempt research, you're going to get your informed consent. And we ask you, if you can, use our template, or we'll take yours, and as long as you have all the elements, we're good for the most part. Well, thank you, David Grimm and Saul Berman from the Chief Information Office, our privacy officer. I think that might have changed, but yeah. Anyway, these guys put in a lot of effort to make a separate GDPR consent document for us. Here's the trick, though. You got to use both documents. So you've got two can-be lengthy consent documents. One's going to be for participation. The other is specific to the requirements of the GDPR. There are a number of points around the GDPR that you have to basically attest to, and then for us, we're going to ask you to demonstrate how you meet them by the use of, I called it the GDPR compliance checklist, but I wanted to point out that I named the document something else, so I apologize. But basically, it's a simple checklist. And it's going to say, tell us how you're doing all these things. And there's like 10 things, I think, in the checklist. So that said, it's another thing that has to happen. Again, doing a simple survey, it feels burdensome, and that's what we're trying to get away from. But the GDPR requires a level of follow-up that kind of falls to us. People see a lot stopping at the IRB's door beyond the human subject element parts of it. So we try to work with you to make it easier. Here's a tool, fill it out. Hopefully that takes care of it, and hopefully you won't have to think too much about that. The other thing we will ask you to do is to give us a copy of our template around data security, because a lot of what's going on with the GDPR is around protection of privacy via really strong practices and technology around keeping data safe. I mean, that's the bottom line. And the GDPR folks didn't mince any words about the countries they felt were pretty weak when it came to protecting privacy. And we were on the list. We might have even been toward the bottom. So again, we do all this in the interest to really due diligence and make sure we're not overlooking anything. So I provided, as part of the materials I gave to Chris, a copy of our consent template, a copy of the GDPR consent template. These I think were all sent to you, and you have access to them. And if you ever needed them, you can let us know. The checklist, which has a different name, but it's like, compliance. The common word is compliance. Like I could forget that one. And then the other is the data security template, which some of you might have some experience with, depending on the nature of the work you've been doing out there in the field. Okay, so those are the kinds of things that we're looking for. And then lastly, I want to point out some excellent resources that you may not be aware of. And I'm always amazed. Our IT folks, our information assurance folks as well, have worked so hard in the past couple of years, not just around GDPR, but to codify what this institution believes about data security, what the requirements are and the expectations for us, for others, as far as using research data, using information around academic records. It goes on and on and on. And one of the things, if you haven't been there lately, I used to tell people, go to Safe Computing, look and see what software is acceptable to use in your research. You go to Safe Computing now, it is like a supermarket of data security information. And one of the things they've really beefed up the security levels, the data classification levels for the institution. They have a whole slew of GDPR-specific tools, if you will. It's a great toolkit. So, for example, they have FAQs around it that I find to be very helpful. We've had to learn this on the run, just like you have to learn this on the run. We are not the experts, and often we will ask people, please speak to OGC, or we will consult with David or Saul Berman to find out what makes sense in a particular situation. Use the tools that are available. They're great. I'm going to really say that again. That's my affirmation for the day. Great, 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 David, and others who worked on it. The other thing is I included an early article that came from, I believe it's a law firm, in February of 2018 that did a super summary of what the GDPR was going to do, because honestly, God, it is so in-depth, it's crazy. I was going to bring my binder just to impress you of just what the GDPR is with all of its, what are those things called? The articles, and then there's one other thing. Anyway, it's kind of like, here's the rule, and then all this stuff behind it to help you understand why it is. And believe it or not, there's some good stuff in there, but oh my gosh, it's crazy. Use the resources. It'll save you a lot of headache and a lot of time. And then lastly, I just want to point out that we also offer guidance to our study teams. We've drafted a very simple guidance document for PIs. And I will be honest with you, I have an even longer document of guidance for our staff, because there is, again, so much that we can share with you, and we see our role as being consultative. So if you want to know and you're thinking about, God, do I want to get involved with this? We can at least tell you, here's what we're going to need, and maybe discuss with you some ways that you can offset some of these issues if it works for your science. Obviously, if it doesn't, we'll make it happen just as you want it to go. So we'll try our best. The last thing I was going to do is, David had put up there a reference to, I think, your email or for Ran, but I put on here what you have at the computing website, GDPR-program at umich.edu. This is where you can send a lot of questions about the GDPR. There's people there who've been fabulous, and I'm getting good feedback from some of our researchers who have used it and gotten some good responses that have worked out well for them. So, that's it. That is it. If you have any questions about human subjects as it relates to the GDPR or just in general, you know hopefully where to find us. We're located on North Campus in the old Pfizer building, and we will come to you as well if you need us to come out. Thanks so much. Anybody got questions? Call us. You know where we're at. We'll look for you. Okay.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, David. That is very important stuff, and we appreciate all that information and all the resources that you've given. So all I have to do is a little affirmation and then excuse you for a break. So here we go. My handy lunchbox of positive affirmations. Is Jennifer McPeak in the house? Jennifer, stand up. Where's Jennifer? Jennifer registered. All right, maybe she's on the live stream. Maybe she's too shy. But by sharing kudos to her and encouragement to her, we're actually doing it for all of us. Jennifer works at the Michigan Center for Translational Pathology, and here's what her leadership say about her. And this is from Christine Betts, who is the department administrator for that center. Jen started with the Michigan Center for Translational Pathology in September of 2019. While she's not been with us for a long time, she has proven to be a great asset to our team. The breadth of her knowledge runs deep from her many years of experience in research administration. She is very proactive and responsive, and we appreciate those qualities. We look forward to the many things that Jen will accomplish here at the Michigan Center for Translational Pathology. So kudos to Jennifer, and you're off to break. 10 minutes. Okay, let's reconvene, folks. Get back on schedule here. All right. Are you ready for another surprise, positive affirmation recognition? We have 4 of them. So this is number 3. We're doing all right. Hold on a sec. All right. All right. Is Phil Boach in the house? Phil, yay! Woo! Phil, it's so good that you're joining us here in right at the meeting. And Val, the CDA at ULAM, and also Mark, the administrative manager and your leader, wants to share the following about you. Phil, thank you for being a steady force on the ULAM Research Administration and Finance team. Your willingness to take on any small or big project anytime has helped us manage our complex customer base. We rely on you for handling many details and keeping us on top of important deadlines. Both Mark Wolf and I, and this is Val talking, appreciate your dedication, consistency, and teamwork. Keep up the amazing work, Phil. You know, it is actually quite important to just find people. I don't know any of the people that we're talking about. We just pulled them randomly and pinged their leadership. But it is actually very important to remind all of us that we're doing hard work every day, and we can get inspired by someone's honor. So it is cool to see you face to face, Phil. And with that, I am going to introduce Mindy Lowe, who is the coordinator of the Faculty Grants and Awards program at OVPR UMore. Here you go, Mindy.
All right, thanks, Kathy, and thanks everyone for letting me join you here today to give you a demo of the Research Commons website. Let's see here, oops. Yeah, it might have gone off a few slides. There it goes.
Oh, perfect, thank you.
All right, so it was identified recently that there was no place on campus for internal faculty funding opportunities, both current and internal, that could be posted anywhere. And so therefore the Office of Research partnered with InfoReady to launch in the fall of 2019 Research Commons, which you can see here on your screen. This is the landing page that, let's see here if I can scroll down, there we go. As you can see here on the landing, oh, thank you. I'm like, where's the mouse hiding? So as you can see here on the landing page, there's 2 carousels, one for internal funding and one for all opportunities. The main difference here is that internal funding posts all of the opportunities that are available earliest to latest, where the all opportunities is any opportunity available. It could be potentially those that don't have funding, or links to the limited submission sites on campus, or anything otherwise, any other potential resources for faculty who are looking for funding. So we would direct people that are looking potentially for current and upcoming funding opportunities to look towards the internal funding tab here. You can do and filter all these different opportunities a few different ways. You can click View All, which will take you to all the opportunities total available. Additionally, you can click on filters here on the far left. So you can filter faculty, mid-career faculty, funding opportunities that are within the $5,000 to $10,000 range, hit apply, and it will search all those available funding opportunities, even in the all opportunities and internal funding opportunities carousels. So basically, those were the kind of, oh, there's also up here a search field. You can type in keywords such as Rackham, and it pulls up all the Rackham opportunities, or potentially China, anything keyword related. So Commons is also integrated with the InfoReady review platform. So if those of you running competitions, you can easily launch a tile from InfoReady review when you launch a competition. And also, you should have received a handout on your table that has on the bottom right the website, researchcommons.umich.edu. On there, it provides you step-by-step instructions for launching a tile from InfoReady review when you're launching a competition. It's pretty easy and self-explanatory as you go through the process. It asks you to upload a logo, keywords, the funding amount, the timing for which the opportunity expires, some key information. And we're monitoring the site regularly, so if things kind of come up wonky, you'll probably receive an email from me saying, hey, can you update this, this, and this? And I'm pretty quick to respond to those so that we can make sure all the complete information is available. Additionally, there's a third carousel down at the bottom here. If you're not launching a competition from InfoReady Review, you can simply click Create a Tile here, and it'll walk you through the steps. I'm obviously not logged in with my credentials to be able to do that right now, but you can, it's basically the same process, you're just not launching it from InfoReady Review. So for some of you stats folks out there, since the 2019 launch, we've had about over 5,000 views of the site. We're experiencing probably about 20 clicks per visit per person. So it's a pretty good, people are staying on the site for quite some time. They're experiencing all the different opportunities available and kind of just playing around with the site as well and launching things too. We've had over 300 tiles created, and there's a lot of the various schools across campus that are already using the tool, such as Flint, Dearborn, Med School, LSNA, Ross, Student Life. We're continually spreading the word across campus, which is the purpose of me being here today. So I guess with that quick demo, are there any questions on the site at all, or how to launch a tile, or anything else I might be able to answer? Okay. All right. Well, thank you for your time today, and we continue to promote Research Commons on campus, so please continue to help us spread the word and have your faculty, and if you can help us to make all the funding available, that would be great. All right, I now turn the podium back over to Kathy.
All right, our last and final. And we have, of course, the affirmation lunch bag. So if this person is here, maybe we can have a bit of a runoff between Philip and this person, all right? They can have the handy Michigan affirmation lunch bag. Dawn Keene. Is Dawn Keene here? All right, Dawn, stand up. Stand up, Dawn. Woo-woo. Now, another thing that I need to share is none of the folks that we have recognized today, they had no idea, right? Only their supervisors were contacted, and within 2 days, which really is a testament to how valuable these individuals are to their units and also to their leadership. So Dawn, dear Dawn, thanks so much for all you do. Everyone in our research group and in the Department of Biostatistics in the School of Public Health knows we can count on you for efficient, timely, expert work together with kindness and generosity. We are so fortunate to have you as a key player on our team. All the best, Mike, Laura, and the entire Bunkie Scott research group. Probably pronounced that wrong, but your research group loves you, Dawn, and we congratulate you too. All right. With that, it's my pleasure to hand this off to Debbie Talley, who will give us a sponsored programs update, and we'll figure out what we're going to do with that M affirmation bag later.
Thanks, Kathy. So I have a few updates today. Let's see. First off, some new staff. We have 2 new accountants that started in January, Bill and Teddy, and also 2 interns and a temp. And we're hoping that some of those will become full-time in the future. We're also recruiting in May, and I don't know that I've actually shared this with Rand, but we do recruiting twice a year. So, I'm sorry, not in May, in March for our May cohort. And we go out to several schools. This time we'll be at Eastern Michigan, Dearborn, so U of M Dearborn, U of M Flint, and Wayne State University. And that's where we're going to job fairs or to the accounting club or whatever event might be happening where we're hoping to get some new interns, interested people for positions in our accounting office. And we're always looking for interns to either start in May or next January. But a message to all of you, if you know of someone who is getting an accounting degree, we certainly would be happy to have them apply for one of those positions as well. So, and this just happens to be our time to go to Eastern, Dearborn, Flint, and Wayne State. In the fall, we normally go to Western and Central Michigan as well. If you have some contacts at other schools and you think that they may be a great place to recruit accountants, we'd be happy to look into going to those schools. So just let us know. And then next up, last fall, I shared with all of you all these reports that we had to get done. And this happens to be our thermometer, I guess, that we had in the office. And over the course of September through December, each week we kept track of how many reports got completed. And I just want to say thank you to all of you for all of your help in us getting those reports completed. So we had a goal of 2,301 reports to be done by December 24th. And we actually completed 2,265, or 98.44% by that date. So I just want to say thank you and give yourselves a round of applause because we could not have done that without all of you. So thank you. Now, for what comes next, when we do all of those reports, we have to do a lot of closeouts. And so this means that we actually have to get all of those lingering charges off of the project so that we can inactivate them. So as of January 31st, we have 1,300 active closeouts, meaning that these projects have been final reported on and they need to be closed out. And thank you to the communications group for finishing my slide, because there's lots of resources available, which I did not mention on my slide, but there's the closeout checklist, which is at finance.umich. The website is there. And then also the Navigate Essentials e-learning video related to closeout. So lots of resources are available to help you with getting those projects closed out. Hopefully you'll utilize those if you need to. If you have questions, not sure what to do, please get those taken care of. The concern about closeouts is that there may be charges that belong on another project, and we may be in the process of getting those reported on, which means that there's a good chance that those charges are not going to be included. So, and that's a horrible thing to have to share with all of you because you know where those go if they don't get included on a sponsor report. So please help our accountants get those charges moved off, get appointments changed, whatever you need to do so that we can close those out and not have to worry about charges that don't get actually charged to the federal government or to the sponsor. And then, uniform guidance. So this may be the first time in history that I get to actually say at this meeting that the uniform guidance report was submitted. So we submitted it, Brian's not here, so I can't even tell what date it was. Sometime the beginning of February, I'm going to say, with no findings. And unfortunately, we don't know that it's been accepted. So the report's due March 31st, and we're thinking that they just don't accept them until it gets closer to that due date. We're assuming that it'll be fine, but That's really exciting news because right around the corner is our entrance meeting with the external with the external auditors to start the 2020 Uniform Guidance Report and audit. And so customer service, I think Brian and his team will be reaching out to you guys once we have a selection. The testing happens in the spring, so after we have the entrance meeting, then the auditors select projects for them to actually look at, and so once we have that information, we'll reach out to you to get that testing done. So more to come on that. And then the last thing I want, I won't go into that yet, Carolyn. I have one more thing to share with you. So on your table is a handout like this. I'm sure you could all see that really quickly, right? So this is from Procurement Services. They've hired a consultant or a consulting firm that specializes in inventory of capital assets or capital equipment. They will be conducting a baseline inventory, and so the timeline is there for all of you. But the few things that I wanted to share is in the bottom right-hand corner, department responsibilities. And this is really just to share with all of you what you can do to help. So they're going to possibly need to know from all of you the contacts for either your department or for the building. They're planning to inventory all assets except for the hospital. So medical school, yes, but not the hospital itself. They're going to work with you to request appointments to restricted areas. And then in the end, when they have to do a reconciliation, I'm sure it's all going to come out that we have exactly what's on our list. But if there's anything to reconcile, they'll be working with you as well. So there will be more information to come. This is really new information, and it's coming to you before we go to RAC. So we're working with RAC. Chris is working with the people involved from procurement to get some more messages out. But we wanted to share this with all of you as well, just so you have the information and can be of help, because there's going to be a couple interchanges coming, and then they will be starting their work on March 16th, and that'll go through June 30th. So it's going to be a lot of work, but they're going to need your help to get that accomplished. And with that, now I can turn it over to Carolyn, who's going to give an update from ITS.
Hello, I'm here to talk about 2 of the e-research systems. So I keep thinking I have to turn that way, but it's right in front of me, so I'll try not to do that. So mostly we're going to talk about proposal management. We have 3 updates we want to share with you, and then I wanted to just tell those of you who do anything in the regulatory management, the IRB system, that we are doing an upgrade this coming weekend. So let's talk about proposal management. The first thing on our list, we have a March update related to 3 things. Some deadline policy items. Now that you've used it for a couple of months, we're going to go back in and tweak a few things, hopefully to help you out. A couple award enhancements that have been on our list to fix. And one thing regarding those of you who do technology control plans. And this is, you know, if you do them, you work with the Export Controls Office. It's mostly people in this College of Engineering. I'm just here to tell you that we're doing some very minor text updates on the page you fill out, and there is additional help text to help you through it. The other thing that I've starred over here is about a hardship, because I don't have a slide on that. And hopefully it's not too much of an inconvenience, but today we allow you to create a hardship on a PAF if it's been awarded, and that kind of doesn't make sense. So we're going to turn off that functionality. Once ORSP creates an award, everything moves over to the award, and you can't do a hardship on a PAF. Let me go through some of the specific items here. So as we when we introduced deadline policy, we introduced a new state that I'm sure you are very familiar with at this point. It's called awaiting finalization. And some folks who are reviewers and approvers for their schools and colleges wanted a way to keep tabs on their paths that they had approved, but they weren't yet finalized and had gone to ORSP. So if you have the role of approver, you'll see in the approved tab of your workspace, there's a new lister called awaiting finalization that will only show up for people who are reviewers, and it's only paths in your department. So hopefully that'll be helpful. The next thing is we had lots of, not really confusion, but lots of churn about the submission deadline. And the fact that when the path gets sent back to you from ORSP, you can't go in and change the submission deadline. And we introduced a new activity called update submission deadline, which was really great, but what we didn't anticipate is that you would have to, at some point, check that you don't have a sponsored deadline. So for March, when you run the update sponsored deadline activity, you can either put in a deadline. If it's null, you can put in a date that is your submission deadline. It has to be equal to or greater than today, though, which means that you can't say something was due before today, which usually means you made a mistake. And then the other thing, you can indicate that there's no sponsored deadline. And hopefully that's pretty straightforward. Every so often, when you're in the state of awaiting final proposal, also a new state we introduced with the deadline policy, a path needs to be changed. And right now, once the schools and colleges have approved it, you can't go in and make a change to the path. You can update your 424 with uploads and things like that, but you can't change a path. If you do need to make a change, the appropriate place to contact is your school, college, or institute level office for assistance. And they have an activity that they can run to get it back to you. It's important, we thought it was important enough that it is now a new workspace message. And literally it says, if unanticipated changes need to be made to the administrative shell, please contact your school, college, institute level office for assistance. And we will also publish for those people who are the approvers for that office, how you get the path back to the schools and colleges. The project team. That's it on deadline policy items. Moving on to some award enhancements. Thank you to the RAC training group for these suggestions. But we've added some text when your path goes on hold, which is when ORSP runs the activity to put it on hold, to tell you a little bit more about why it's on hold and what actions you may or may want to take, and to tell you who put it on hold and what office to call. Similarly, if you end up on compliance hold, the instruction is to not call ORSP, but to instead contact one of the regulatory offices depending on why your path is on hold. And we've added in some job aids and some contacts so you can hopefully find those people fairly quickly. Let's see here. And in the vein of workspace messages, we have more to add for awards and mods. Yes, they are in red. The one I put up here has 3. It's very unlikely you're going to see 3, but for purposes of example, there are 3 here. So the 3 are, one, that you have an agreement acceptance request in progress, also known as an AAR, not to be confused with an ACR, and to refer you to the link on the awards tab. So what does that mean? It is really there to tell you that your award isn't going to get awarded until that gets approved and is back at ORSP. If you have a question about it, you can go click on the AAR and see what state it's in and see if you have any action to take or if your reviewer has any action to take. The other one we're adding is to let people know that one or more of the sponsors is on the restricted party list. This is really for the central offices. But they will contact you to let you know if you have any action item and to let you know how they're going to deal with this path. So, award. So most of the time before you see this message, your PR will have reached out. If they haven't, feel free to reach out to your PR and find out what action, if any, should be taken. And then the last one we're adding is regarding the multiple principal investigators. This is only for the NIH-defined term. This isn't projects that involve PIs and co-PIs here at U of M. So this is really when ORSP checks that there is a multiple project investigator as a term. And this is really a reminder. Craig already mentioned it in his update. If you're filling out a postal or a change request in ERPM, there is a new type called a foreign component, and it comes with the list of instructions on what needs to be uploaded. And then lastly, on the money, 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 or $ tab, we've added in, per request of our award enhancements team, a little bit of more information at the project period summary level. So the red box is really highlighting the change that we're making. Most of this page talks about the project grants and the budget period and what dollar changes have happened per budget period. However, if you were to go to this page and you couldn't see, you didn't know that it was in a no-cost extension, you wouldn't see that anywhere here. So we're adding in the project period start date and the project period end date, so you know that the overall project isn't over if it's in a no-cost extension. It's really repeating information that's on the main tab. And then switching over, so we're going to release our ERPM update on March 9th, and then we have a couple weeks later on March 21st, we're going to do an SF424 update. Those of you who do NIH applications, you know that they're releasing a Forms F in the next couple weeks. We will have support for that starting after the weekend of March 21st. In addition to the form changes, we have a couple of bugs that we're going to resolve. One is if you were getting, if you missed entering a value, like a fringe benefit on one of the budget pages, and instead of giving you one error, we gave you 5 or 10, and you had to go searching through all the budget pages with one of us to find out which one was giving you that error. That's all corrected. The other nice to have is when you go to validate your 424, if the FOA has closed, you're going to see a warning message at the top that tells you your FOA is closed. In most cases, that's a pretty good sign that you don't want to submit it because the agency is going to reject it. If it's NIH and under continuous submission, and you usually know when you're applying to those, you can ignore it. It doesn't prevent you from completing the activity either. And then just, we'll probably be back here in May telling you about this, but we have another planned 424 release. The grants.gov is updating about 31 forms because the state and the country code standards around them have changed, and unfortunately it means touching a lot of forms. So we're going to do the most common forms starting in May, and then we'll follow up later in the fall for ones that we don't really use that often. You're standing here, or you?
I just thought we stand.
Okay, I'm like, do I have enough time here? Just had 2 more slides, David.
Go faster, Carol.
Yeah, I know, I'm like, anyway, this weekend, for those of you who do IRB applications, we are doing a regulatory management update. And it is a framework version for us. It's version 9 if you care about it. It starts this weekend on the 29th. We were originally going to go on the February 8th and 9th, and we had to reschedule it due to a technical issue. There are really no changes to the content of the IRB applications or anything in there. It changes the interface and then the navigation of the smart form. And I have just a couple slides showing that. Today, you use the jump to when you're in the path, or in this case, the Hume. The new way is instead of using the jump to on the top, there's going to be a new navigation pane on the left-hand side. I know here it's on the right, but when you're in the forms, it's on the left. And you will pick what page you want to go to by scrolling along the left-hand side. So I'm telling you these things because for those of you who only fill out PAFs or deal with awards, this is also going to change when we do that update later this year. The other thing is, instead of doing pop-ups, they're switching to something called a slide-in. And instead of doing an ad or update browse and you see another window pop up, you're going to see something slide in from the right-hand side of the smart form. And hopefully it's a way to not, so you don't forget to fill out the pop-up. Sometimes people close their browser and then they have all these little pop-ups left. And this kind of forces you to fill this out and hit save and then go back to the main page. So we think it's a good thing.
Carolyn, can I ask a question?
Yep.
Do browsers have settings that defend against slide-ins like they do for pop-ups?
We have not run into that. Yeah, and we've tested that, so, yeah. For those of you who are using the RM system, there are lots of materials around our upgrade. There's a link to a brief video here, and then there's also a more comprehensive list of the changes. And then to let you know that this is the first of the e-research systems to be updated in 2020. The M-Inform system is going to be updated in June, and then the other two will follow after that. So that's all I have. I see David's ready over here. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, David.
Hey, Carolyn. Before I forget, I just want to remind everyone that there are printed brochures on the tables. We put just a few of them on each of the tables, so if there is more demand at your table than brochures available, just let me or Cindy know, who's at the back there, and we will get you as many brochures as you would like. Well, maybe not as many as you'd like, but a lot. And for those of you who are watching remotely, there is a PDF version of the brochure also that is available from the Navigate site, so you too can have your own brochure. Okay, just some quick updates from the Navigate program. We have a Lunch and Learn session coming up on Thursday. If you were thinking you could attend in person, you are wrong. If you've already registered, you're fine. But if you think, as a last minute thing, oh, I'd like to go to that. Nope, it's full. Remote attendance is still an option. There's a link in the slides, or you can go to the Navigate website to still register to attend remotely. So we hope to see many of you there in person and online. Budgeting Basics is being held Thursday, April 9 and Wednesday, April 29. It's a 2-day class. Applications are due on Friday, March 20th. Advanced Budgeting, Task-Based Budgets is happening Wednesday, April 15th and Monday, May 4. Applications for that are due on Friday, March 27. And Uniform Guidance Cost Principles is a 1-day class. That's Thursday, April 30th. You need to register for that by Monday, April 20th. I will also just add yesterday was the due date for this semester's round of fundamentals. So hopefully if you were planning on attending fundamentals this semester, you got your application in. If for some reason you didn't, you can always email me or the Navigate team. In addition, we do have a new Navigate Essentials e-learning module available online. This is on stewardship for research administrators. That's available directly in the MyLink system or through the e-learning tile on the Navigate website. I also wanted to put the call out for volunteers. The Navigate team, in conjunction with the RAC training subcommittee, has been working on a new faculty resource portal called FRANK, the Faculty Research Administration Need to Know portal. And we are looking for some faculty to participate in brief sessions of usability testing for that. Our preference is for newer junior faculty or faculty who are just new to conducting sponsored research. It should take no more than 30 to 45 minutes, and we will go to them. If they are scared about being alone with us, then their research administrator can be in attendance too, but either way is fine. And if you think you know of a faculty member who might be a good fit, please have them, please reach out to the Navigate team, or they can reach out to the Navigate team, that's fine too. Navigate-research@umich.edu. All right, then some professional society updates. The NCURA, National Council of University Research Administrators, are having their annual meeting in Washington, D.C., August 9th through 12th, and pre-registration is now open. So if you're interested, please go to their website. In addition, if you feel like making a last-minute trip to Puerto Rico, March 2nd or 3rd is the Financial Research Administration Conference, and March 4th and 5th is the Pre-Award Research Administration Conference. So those of you who are already planning on attending, lucky you. The rest of us will be in beautiful Michigan. In addition, the NCURA combined spring meeting for Region 3 and Region 4 is happening April 26th through 29th in St. Pete Beach, Florida. So that's almost as good as Puerto Rico. And some additional things to keep in mind. There's a traveling workshop April 19th through 21st in Charleston, May 27th through 29th in Las Vegas, and June 15th through 17th in West Palm Beach. In addition, the Society of Research Administrators, or SRA International, we are having the Michigan chapter meeting of SRA on June 12th at Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo. It's the first time that the meeting has been held there. If you are interested in submitting a potential speaker topic for that meeting, there's a link here, or you can also email me for more information. And NORDUP, the National Organization of Research Development Professionals, is having their annual meeting May 17th through 20th in San Antonio, Texas. And the NORDUP Great Lakes Regional Conference is happening on October 26th at the University of Indiana, Bloomington. So save the date if you're interested in research development. And with that, are there any questions? Is anyone here going to Puerto Rico? Who said yes? No one? Oh, sorry. All right, Becky, I'm turning things over to you.
All right. So we've got a couple of things to follow up. Oops. Well, I wasn't supposed to show you that yet, sorry. We wanted to follow up with some notes for, sorry, my computer. There we go. Some acknowledgments and notes for all of you. So we had a few people that we were able to pick and acknowledge directly individually, but we would like to acknowledge all of you, especially at this time of year. It's been stressful, it's been long. It feels like it's going to continue to be long, but spring will come. So we wanted to share some thoughts from Rebecca Cunningham for research administration around the university. So she said, I'm grateful for the opportunity to work with faculty and staff who are driven to impact society for the greater good. You serve as a key component of support throughout the entire life cycle of the project, from identification of new funding opportunities through the important closeout requirements, navigating a myriad of systems, policies, processes, and regulations. Let me express my sincere gratitude for all your incredible efforts and continued commitment. And specifically about a project that has touched many of us recently, she wanted to extend her sincere appreciation for the recent efforts to provide other support amendments and M-Inform updates. She understands this request resulted in a lot of additional work for all of us and for our colleagues over the holiday break and into the new year. And she so greatly appreciated our attention to this important matter. Based on our effort and expertise, the university is well positioned to meet the challenges we face in a globally interconnected world of rapid change and to continue our contributions to the public good. Thank you. So that is how we're going to wrap up the meeting today. I wanted to thank everybody for attending and participating. Again, as you've heard throughout the presentations, if you have any questions or if you have any suggestions for topic ideas, feel free to email us. Oops. I think I have our email in here somewhere. So we've got our email address up here, and we also will be, again, posting the video from the meeting soon. And our next meeting will be Wednesday, May 20th. So just think about that in your head. What will we feel like May 20th? Much better, hopefully. So thank you, and have a great rest of your day.